Hills of Success is a series that promotes money matters to smart women. During each episode, Zenelia Harris will share money lessons that debunk the typical messaging you hear around women and money. So if you want to gain valuable money tips wrapped around professional advice to help you navigate your personal money and professional journey, tune in to Hills of Success. Hello, I would like to welcome you to Hills of Success, a Finance in Stilettos podcast series. I'm Zenelia Harris, author of the book Finance in Stilettos, Money Matters for the Well-Heeled Woman, certified financial planner, former member of the CNBC Financial Advisor Council, and president of Harris & Harris Wealth Management Group, a firm focused on the financial success of professional women who are going through various life transitions such as job change, marriage, widowhood, or retirement. I would like to welcome my guest today, Charisse Conanan Johnson. She is a chartered financial analyst and is the original wealthy girl who would define what it means to be wealthy for years to come. She is the author of a book entitled A Wealthy Girl, 7 Steps to Prosperity, Peace, and Personal Power. She's a wealth expert, investor, business strategist, public speaker, and TV personality. She has pursued a life of purpose by investing in financial markets, teaching, building businesses, and stepping out on faith. She is the managing partner and head of the advisory practice at Next Street, a mission-oriented firm that is mobilizing how its public and private clients provide more capital, customers, and services to entrepreneurs and small businesses that have been systematically held back. She is the creator of the Charisse Says platform, where she actively blogs and has produced the Charisse Says show and Charisse Says online academy. She makes investing simple, easy, and fun, and has been a featured financial expert on TD Ameritrade and Experian, and is a financial contributor to the Huffington Post and American Express Open Forum. She is a graduate of Yale University and the University of Chicago Booth School of Business. Charisse loves building relationships, traveling, sports, and exploring the world through international cuisine. She resides in Chicago with her husband George and daughter Gabrielle. Let's welcome my guest today, Charisse Conanan Johnson. Charisse, it is so great to have you on the podcast Hills of Success. I'm so excited about our conversation and expanding on you sharing information about who you are, your background, and your new book, I Am a Wealthy Girl. So can you just, begin by talking about what prompted you into writing the book, A Wealthy Girl?
Absolutely. And first of all, Zenelia, thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. I've heard so many great things about you, so I'm excited for this conversation. To your question, what inspired me to write the book, A Wealthy Girl, 7 Steps to Prosperity, Peace, and Personal Power, really started 2 years ago. And at that time, I was on maternity leave after giving birth to my daughter, Gabrielle. And as I looked into her face and started to reflect and think about her future and her journey, I wanted to leave something for her that encapsulated in written form many of the stories, not of just myself, but of her grandmother, of her great-grandmother, and capture that in a book surrounded by what it means to truly obtain wealth in both the tangible aspects, so the financial aspects, but also on the very real intangible aspects, her faith, her relationships, the ways in which she has particular skill sets or will develop them over time. And as I thought about her, I also thought about other women and people that could benefit from that advice and just that perspective on reframing that wealth conversation. And so she became new inspiration for me. And then fast forward, I didn't start truly writing the book until COVID started. That really paused me and so many other people around the globe in their tracks and provided the space to get the thoughts and the desires of my heart out on paper, to bring something forth that I thought people could utilize in their own lives and own their power of becoming wealthy.
Wow, I love it. I know in the book you talk about the stories of your grandmothers, both your maternal and your paternal grandmothers. Can you kind of summarize their impact on you and your life goals and how you view money?
Absolutely. So first of all, you must know that I was in the blessed position to grow up close by my grandmothers, both on my paternal and maternal side. And physical proximity was helpful for us, but also that allowed for the emotional and spiritual connection that I have to those women in my life. And as I was growing up as a girl and then a young woman, I spent a lot of time with my grandmothers understanding their journeys. And both of my grandmothers migrated as part of the second Great Migration in this country, which took over 6 million African Americans and blacks who were living in the South to the North in the 1950s. And they were two people that made that trek from the South to the North. My maternal grandma Shine made the trek from South Carolina to Harlem, and my paternal grandma Pearl made the trek from Alabama to Harlem. And so as I found out more about what took them here, and for both of them, although nuanced, what took them here was opportunity or jobs. I mean, my maternal grandmother was valedictorian of her high school, but her family couldn't pay for her to go to college, and so she came up north, one, to get away from the Jim Crow South, and two, to really find that economic opportunity by way of a job. And so in hearing that, because she didn't have the opportunity to go to college, she instilled in her children, who were my mom and my aunts and uncles, and she had 6, that education was key, and that was power, and that was knowledge. And so she wanted her children to go to college, and all of 6 of them went. And then her children instilled in their children, who are myself, my brother, and my 12 cousins, that if we could set ourselves up with that exposure, that knowledge, we too could pursue the dreams that we have in our life. And then as I listened to my paternal grandmother, she migrated up here too, and part of her journey was around wanting to seek love in addition to her economic ambitions. She wanted to raise a family, and she found work as a chambermaid, and she had a lot of dignity and pride in those details and bringing comfort to others. And so as I grew up in that environment where both grandmothers had high esteem for the way in which they lived their life, that in itself is wealth, right?
Mm-hmm.
We sometimes think wealth isn't around the education or isn't around the exposure or isn't about the love that transcends between generations. But I want to debunk that myth. Wealth is not just the money that sits in your bank account, and my grandmothers passed on those principles, and they told me, when your money starts looking funny, you better do something else. And
right.
So their money was looking a little funny in the South, and living in that segregated time and not being able to realize their full potential, and so they left. They pioneered. They started their families here up north. And one of my grandmothers also started her own business. I mean, she was working for, she called the man, which in her vernacular was the white man, and in that she wasn't able to earn the amount of money that she thought she was valued for. And so she left that company, and it was a homemaking company, and she started doing jobs on her own. In today's vernacular, that would be a sole proprietor. And not just for herself. She provided opportunity for other women migrated from the South to the North, and if she couldn't do a job, she gave them jobs. So they set up their own sole proprietorships, and they had their own independent contractors. So what they told me then in their stories is that there's power in the collective, there's power in asking for what you want, and that's all about being female, that's all about utilizing their culture, and they came from that Black South Southern mentality of we can do better together, and if we take care of our community, we all can be wealthy. And those are the kind of lessons that they taught me about money, but more importantly about wealth.
I love it because there is so much power in women supporting women. And also they were painting a picture of how, as Black women or women of color, how we do support each other, because of course the media paints this picture that we don't, but we actually do. I think about all the women in my life and how they've been crucial to me achieving what I have achieved, and I am just so grateful. So just you seeing that growing up, I can only imagine the impact that had and how it has influenced you. Now, I want to talk about how, or your definition of wealth, because you have a twofold definition, and I want you to explain it because it's beautifully stated in your book. So I want you to talk about the two aspects of wealth that you define.
Absolutely. So, in short, wealth is made up of both our tangible assets, which I'll explain in a second, plus our intangible assets. And our tangible assets, those are the assets that have financial or monetary value. Those are the real estate that you might own, the stocks in your brokerage account or in your retirement account that you might own. That's the cash that sits in your bank. And that encapsulates a private business that you might own. But it's really the net asset number that folks pay attention to. And that net asset number is derived from subtracting out the debt that you may owe someone. And so you can have mortgage debt, you can have student loan debt, you can have credit card debt. All of those debts, when you subtract them from those assets, you get your net asset number, or what some people term as your net worth. And that's the traditional wealth definition. What I'm arguing for and what I'm stressing is that wealth goes also into your intangible assets. And that's where the beauty and that's where the power comes in. I see those intangible assets as the unique skills that you might possess, the cultural capital or the exposure to different experiences, whether art or international travel, that give you a kind of social capital in the world and allow you to maneuver and signal to others that you have that kind of richness to your experiences. That intangible assets can also include the relationships that you have, whether it's traditional career-based relationships or your familiar and friend relationships that then translate into supporting you as you move forward. Another aspect of your intangible wealth comes from your faith. For me, that is linked to my Christian identity. For me, faith and God and then wealth go hand in hand, but for others might take on the broader secular definition of hope. I think we could all be hopeful about things that we cannot see right in the present day. And so when you take the collection of your intangible assets that I just shared, plus your tangible assets, which are around your net assets, you have that definition of wealth. And the reason why I think this is so important for women, and important for women of color is that the standard of that traditional measure of wealth was set up by white patriarchal systems. And so I'm sure you're reading in the news and have been the last couple of years that the wealth gap in this country is extremely large. And it's really important, right? The
Yes.
wealth gap between whites and blacks,
Exactly.
whites having 10 times the amount of wealth as their black counterparts, and the wealth effect that transpires, particularly for women who earn 82 cents to the dollar for every dollar that a male earns, which when you translate, for instance, just in 2019, that's over $540 billion of net earnings less that women have, which you don't have as much earnings and you can't have as much wealth, and so the wealth gap for women also is lower relative to a man. And when you have those standards set by white patriarchal society, then you're always trying to catch up, right? You're always in a deficit mindset. It would take years and major structural changes to how our country operates to close that gap. And so what I'm arguing is, yes, we could still chip away, and yes, we should demand those structural changes, but in the meanwhile, we should be screaming to the rooftops on the assets that we do have. And I prefer that asset framing because I'm a big fan of an author. Her name is Bell Hooks, and she wrote a book called Ain't I a Woman? And she challenged the notion of measuring ourselves to standards that never had us in mind in the first place. And so when I say that your wealth is more than the dollars and cents that sit in your bank account, it encapsulates so much more of who we are, so much more of those intangible assets. And we can use those same intangible assets to get the tangible ones that we want. Because at the end of the day, when I ask people, well, why do you want to be wealthy and what that means for you, it's so much more about freedom. It's so much more about opportunity. It's so much more about having impact. And so those are the things, though, when you come in that full circle definition of wealth, means so much more.
Yes, definitely. I know when I think of my wealth calculation, I think of it definitely the traditional way for sure, but I also think about legacy and the things that I'm passing along. I'm thinking about what I'm giving back through education and community. So I definitely understand and appreciate how you have expanded the traditional definition of wealth and included our community and included our skill sets and included our relationships. And the relationships is not just career relationships, but our familial relationships and our friendships, because all of those things impact our life and bring richness to our lives. So I love it. I love it. I love it. So now what do you have to say about the commitment that Goldman Sachs has indicated they want to provide to black women, and to, I guess this is one of their solutions in trying to close the wealth gap amongst the African Americans. So what are your thoughts about their commitment to our community?
Absolutely. So first off, I want to commend Goldman for putting out the commitment. I think that's the first step in trying to identify a specific group or goal that you want to achieve. And for those of you who haven't heard about the commitment, it's a $10 billion commitment to invest in black women. And they released a report that showed many of the statistics that have been popularized over the last couple of years, including the wealth gap, including the housing, financial asset gap. And so they want to make then the investment to help close that gap by investing in black women. Honestly, Zenelia, I think the proof will be in the pudding on how they execute on that. And so I want to hold Goldman's feet to the fire. I want to make sure that they do what they say that they're going to do. What does that truly mean? One way that I feel like they could execute in a big way is to, one, advocate at the political level for big structural changes, and then put some money, right? Like, get other people to match that commitment. Goldman can't do it itself. There's too wide of a gap for Goldman to do it themselves, right? And you've seen all these other big banks make commitments. J.P. Morgan made a commitment to $30 billion to close the racial wealth gap. And so, yes, I feel these banks are also jockeying amongst each other to say who is going to do what and put their brand behind that. But I want to come back a year from now, and then 2 years from now, and then 5 years from now. What did you do? What is your part in closing that gap? And are you truly living out the mantra of wanting to support black women also internally? I mean, I think if you look at Goldman's leadership, one might question how they are internally investing in black women. And so I'm happy about the panel that they have and the advisory group. It's an all-star cast of black women who I admire. And so I hope that this is the start and not the end of what we'll see, whether it's investing in black female businesses. And let us be reminded that black females were the highest and fastest growing segment of entrepreneurs before the pandemic, but it's also the group that got hit hardest by the pandemic. And so there's power in us as a collective, and so we'll have our jury out, and we should all be holding their feet to the fire.
Exactly. So tell me what drew you to the finance industry? What's the little, expand a little bit more on your journey to where you are right now.
Absolutely. I love that question because it allows me to talk about my mama and daddy. Right? And
talk on,
right? And first you should know that my mother and father are like my crush couple, right? Like, they have now been married for over 45 years. And as part of their black love, and my dad is half black and half Filipino, so I say they're black love and Filipino swagger.
Right.
So when they were raising my brother and I, my dad was the one also that really enforced in us the power of relationships, the power of making sure we invest in each other, and my mom just feeds off of that. They both, in their careers, also are passionate people that care about community. My dad is a special education teacher, now retired. My mom was a nurse by training, but then spent 30 years providing healthcare services to the homeless. So having an impact on your community mattered in our household and in their household, and that left an imprint on my brother and I. And so when it was time to go to college, and I ended up going to Yale University on the belief that I belonged at Yale, but also starting with a belief that, man, I could fit in here, even though no one in my family went there, and I wasn't exposed to that kind of environment. And so when I got there, I said to myself, wow, there is a lot of tangible wealth here. There are a lot of rich people here, right? And, I think the Ivies sometimes are known for that, but it didn't really hit me till I stepped on campus and could see it for myself. And so I said to myself, well, how does one get this kind of tangible wealth? I dropped my pre-med pursuits because I thought one of the best ways to help people was by being a doctor, but I said, no, economic power is one way to help people as well. And so that drew me to Wall Street. And in my college career, my mom encouraged me to invest in my first stock, which was Dell stock. And I said, I could almost double my money and use that proceeds to pay down student loan debt when I graduated from college.
Yes.
And then I wanted to go into a profession where I could learn the art of growing wealth in the markets. And so that took me to J.P. Morgan. And I learned how to invest in the U.S. stock market because I was part of the investment team that invested on behalf of large institutional clients. And we ran a $10 billion portfolio. And I got to pick stocks and had a slice of that portfolio. And so I had a lot of responsibility. By the age of 27, I was a vice president. I had got my chartered financial analyst designation. And at the same time, it blew my mind that all of these institutions had access to this kind of information, to the kind of products. And that was unsettling for me because everyday people didn't have that kind of access. And so that's when I decided, you know what, wealth is more than just the stock market. It's more than in institutions that have millions and billions of dollars. And I started to think about private companies as really the origination of the germination of that wealth creation. And in this country, households that have entrepreneurs are have 5 times the net worth of households that do not. And so I started to think about that journey and that also as a way to grow wealth, and that's accessible. And so I then went to business school at Chicago Booth in Chicago. I moved from New York to Chicago. I started on that entrepreneurial journey to give me that exposure, but also find out more about that wealth path. And then I started a company that tried to use the tools and insights that I had learned at J.P. Morgan and bring it down by way of making it accessible to college grads, to people in their 20s. And I started a financial technology company called Smarties.com. And that gave me the other side of the barbell where folks were living paycheck to paycheck, not sure what to do with their money. And
right.
So that really rounded me out, and I experienced, though, some of the same issues that are prominent today, and this was, almost 10 years ago now, where black females had trouble accessing capital to grow and scale their businesses, and that left a salty taste in my mouth, and I wanted to figure out what do we do about this. And so I ended up closing that business, but in going through that journey, I decided my next sort of rodeo would be how can I have an impact on entrepreneur communities, which took me to my job here at Next Street, where I'm a managing partner, and all we do is want to build inclusive entrepreneurial communities by working with governments, philanthropy, Fortune 500 companies to get more products and services as well as customers to those businesses and capital. And so at the same time, I started an independent blog, the one in which this book sits underneath, called Charisse Says, to write and have my own voice and still give me that creative outlet to talk about all things related to wealth. So that's my journey, and I'm sticking with it.
Well, I appreciate you sharing such insightful information. And I want people to be able to reach you. So please share the ways that people can continue to follow your work, where they can obtain your book, and all of your social media handles.
Absolutely. So the best way to reach me on any platform is my name, and my name is spelled Charisse, Says, SAYS.com is the website, and that Charisse Says, that handle is the same on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. And so you can definitely reach out to me on any social media platform, but my website, CharisseSays.com, you'll find my book. You can sign up for my newsletter, which is free, and you can follow me there as well because I tend to write a lot. And you can also purchase my book. You'll have links that'll take you to Amazon, which is the best place. It's the place that most people think of, and you'll find my book there as well, and that'll come. You can listen to it via audiobook or get the ebook or paperback, and hopefully also impact you and change your life. And if it moves you so much, feel free to leave a review and help someone else and change their life.
I love it. I love it. Thank you, Charisse, for joining the conversation, moving the conversation forward, expanding on our definitions of wealth, and the legacy that not only you're going to leave to other women, but also the legacy you're leaving to your daughter. And by the way, you're leaving a legacy to my daughter, because the reason why I'm doing Heels of Success is my dedication to her, so that when there are times when she doesn't want to listen to the advice that I have, she has all these beautiful women to listen to and gain insight and information from. So thank you for sharing your story.
Well, thank you so much for having me, and I'll be thinking about your daughter. What is your daughter's name?
Her name is Madison.
Wonderful. Well, Madison, if you're listening, I know that you are a wealthy girl, and listen to your mama.
Thank you so much. And again, I appreciate you joining the Heels of Success.